Welcome to Watercolours with Caroline, the spring series. And this time we're going to be doing quite a few line and wash paintings and drawings. So you'll need a waterproof pen. Check that it's waterproof. I like to have a few different sizes for fine lines and thick lines, but it's totally up to you. Just make sure that before you start painting, your lines are dry and your pen is waterproof. So we're going to start off with the stores in Piddinghoe, which is no longer there. It's a private house now. The building's still there. The picture was taken in 1961 by my dad. And my grandfather had just taken my brother and I out for a morning walk in late May, beautiful sunshine, and bought us an ice cream. So it has a lot of special memories for me. Anyway, I hope that you're going to enjoy painting this first one and get ready. Get your pens and paints out and let's get going. The Piddinghoe Stores. And it's interesting that I have one that I did here in 1988 that has faded a little bit. I think that was probably Winsor Newton Cotman. And also the difference between the burnt sienna I used on the roof and the light red, the English red that I used on this roof. I kind of like the English red, but if you don't have it, that's okay. You can use burnt sienna with a bit of red mixed in. The English red or Venetian red or light red is the same pigment as burnt sienna. It's just heated longer to change it. It's a PR101. So it's exactly the same earth pigment. They just heat it a bit longer to make it go red. They just change how they produce it. So let's hopefully, I hope you have got your ink work done. If you haven't got your ink work done, don't worry. You can do it at the end when your painting is all dry. And I quite often go back and do a little bit of extra ink work when it's dry. If I feel, for instance, that the tree might need a little bit more texture, maybe the windows need a little bit of more black or something like that, you can put that on afterwards and tighten up your ink lines. If you want to, that's fine. And I have a few pens here. This is the Platinum pen. My Preppy is not here at the moment, but it's exactly the same. And that takes carbon ink, which is completely waterproof. And it's just a little cartridge that goes in here. Love these pens, these Platinum pens. They come in 0.03 and 0.02, I think. So nice, fine nibs. And what I like is this steel nib does not wear out on the watercolor paper. It lasts and lasts and lasts. Whereas, you know, these ones with their little fine little nibs, they tend to wear out very, very quickly on the watercolor paper and on the pigments. So I've actually switched. I always used these Micron pens before. I like them. I still like them. But I found that the more expensive Staedtler pens last much, much longer. They are much stronger than the other ones. So I've paid the extra money to get a whole range of these. They come in brush pens, they come in different sizes. So I like those ones. But my favorite are the Platinum pens that you put the ink in. So you only really need one pen if you want to do your ink work. That's fine. Sometimes it's nice to have a different one. We're going to start with the sky on this one. So I'll get the sky so we can see it. And move that over there a little bit. And we're just going to use a Cerulean Blue for a nice summery sky. This photograph was taken, I believe, at the end of May, and a lovely, lovely summer's day. You can see from the shadows it was nice and sunny and bright. And that's what we want to show. We want to show the sunshine. So just Cerulean Blue, that's all we're going to use. We'll mix that up first. Grab my brush. And just cover this up because I'm messy. And bring my palette over. And I always put a little bit of water on there first and grab some Cerulean Blue. And it's quite strong. But remember, we're going to put water on, so you don't want it too weak, otherwise it dilutes away too much. So that's sort of a good amount, and pop that down there. And then what I want to do is wet the sky and these trees here so that you don't have a line between the trees. But you want to keep the roof and the side of the building and the wall all completely dry. So with nice clean water, you're going to wet your sky. This will give you lovely, lovely, soft clouds, summery clouds. I'm going to make sure. Now you don't have to actually paint over the trees. You can a little bit. But if you take your water just up to the edge of the tree, you're going to have a cutout and pasted on look to it. And your tree might have even a white line around it, which is okay. You know, that's an okay look, but it's a little bit better to have it just blending in. But you want your roof to have a nice sharp outline. I'm just going to tilt it. Oh, I can see a couple of spots where I didn't get the water. So I'm going to make sure that goes on. And I often start from the top because that's where I want the color to be strongest. And I want to build the shapes of the clouds as I put my blue on. And I don't want them to be straight across. We've got this lovely angled roof here, so I'd kind of like my clouds to come in, you know, at an opposite angle pointing towards this shop. So I'm going to sort of plan that. You can go quite slow because your paper is wet. So you can really plan your clouds. Have a couple of them, not too many. It's quite a small area. So, and I want along the edge of the red roof here, which is quite close to the top, I want that nice and blue. So we'll get the blue in there. If your blue is too weak, too watery, you're not going to get a lovely summery sky. So you don't want it too wet. Now, as we come down to the trees, you can paint over the tops of the trees. You definitely want to paint down the side of the house, shop or house, it's a house now, because you want to get that nice crisp white edge against the blue. And this roof too. And I like to take a little bit of blue and break up the cloud just a little bit. And you didn't see what I did, but over to the side on my towel, I washed and dabbed a bit of wet off of my brush so that I've got that damp, thirsty brush. I can just move that out a little bit, break up those clouds, and I can just suck a little bit of that blue off of the tree, but not all of it. I don't want a dry edge. It's going to be green over the top, so the green will go nicely with the blue. And then you don't want to do too much. The temptation is to keep on fussing with the sky, and skies work much, much better if you just get them on there and you don't fuss. The water will do a lot with your paint. It'll keep blending it in. The paint's going to lighten as it dries, and the sky is going to be one of the lightest parts of your painting apart from the white store. So you don't have to worry too much. You can leave your blue there because we're going to mix the blue with your cobalt to make the doors and window frames of the store. So we just want a slightly different blue for those, a little stronger, and I'm going to mix the cerulean with cobalt for those. I'll let you do that. And the next thing we'll do, while the sky is blending and drying, we're going to do the path and the side of the building and all of the things that are kind of a creamy beige color, very, very light creamy beige color. So we're not going into dark paint for the next part, but we do want our sky to just sit and dry itself while we work on those things. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to just very gently take my Kleenex along the edge of my masking tape, just so I don't get any bleed back from paint or water on the edge of the painting. I'll move that over a little bit, bring my mixing tray over. And we're going to mix, well, we're going to use one colour, the raw sienna, just as it is, and then we're going to mix a grey for the next step, for the path and the road and the side of the house and everything else. So you can either use a raw sienna or you can use yellow ochre. It doesn't matter which one you use, whatever you like to use, whatever you have. I have a raw sienna light, which I'm really liking. It's this one here by Daniel Smith, and it really is lovely and light, like a beautiful yellow ochre. Oh, I've got one up, got some up here too. I've got them in a couple of places. So I'm going to use that one. You can use, I mean, they're all very similar. I'm going to need to be very watery. Yeah, it's an earth color, and so very important for everything. This is, you know, this I've got different ones. This is a different raw sienna, and I have a yellow ochre, which is almost the same. So nice earth colors. So we want one of those. I've forgotten what we're doing now. And we also need a gray for the road, to put some gray tones in the road and the wall. So to mix the gray, I've used ultramarine and burnt umber. I'm sorry. To make the gray, I've used ultramarine and burnt umber. So let's bring this tray over. So ultramarine or cobalt, if you don't have ultramarine, cobalt will do. And then burnt umber, not too much. We're just going to take it down to a gray color, kind of like that. And then I'm going to add some water because we don't want it too strong. We're just making a road and a pathway. So a little bit of water to get that gray not so strong. And just your yellow ochre or your raw sienna. Grab some more of that. So we're going to start with the raw sienna, and that's going to go in several places. We're going to go over the whole of the road, the steps. Let's zoom in. And this is line and wash, so we're not as painting as carefully as we do when we you know, when we do several layers of paint. This is more like washes going in with those. And we're also going to do the wall. Being very careful at the side of the white building, coming down into the grass here, and this wall here. And now we're going to dilute that raw sienna even more, add more water, because this is very, very subtle. We're going to put just a slight shadow on the side of the shop. Very, very slight, very diluted. And again, very diluted. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush, my number 4. And I have a couple of places I'm going to put this very diluted wash. It's going to go on the sign and on the signboard. Down here is a signboard where they would have hung a sign. It had nothing on that day. The inside of the doorway here, in a little bit of shade. Small, you can have a small 4 or 2 brush. And inside of the window, inside of this sort of area here, inside of the window here, Just trying to remember all the places we need a little bit of this sort of color. And one last place. It depends on whether your sky is dry or not, so be careful. I'm going to come down these roof tiles here, and then I'm going to have to be very careful against the sky. I don't want it to bleed, so if I decide it's not dry enough, I won't do it. The roof tiles that come across the top of the roof and down here are much lighter than the brick tiles. And before any of that dries, we're going to take the grey that we mixed, and hopefully nothing's dried too much, because we want a little bit of wet in wet for the road. This here, the sidewalk outside the shop, and then there's road. So I'm not going to fill the whole road with that grey, just either side, and a little bit of the wall, just here and there. I can always put some on later on the wall, just a little bit of the wall. I can come back and do more later on, just to give it a slightly darker tone. And then we want to make sure that all of that is going to dry before we move on, because we don't want to put the blue on the windows while this is wet. We don't want to put the blue on the door while it's wet. We want to make sure this is dry. So it might take a moment, if you've got a moment or a hairdryer, to make sure those areas are dry before we move on. I'm just double checking that I've got everything in there. Oh, one last place. Let's grab my 6 brush. There's a little bit of a shadow coming down the side, just the side there. I'm just putting a little bit of shadow there. I'm just blending the road in. Now there will be more shadow on the road and the sidewalk in a second layer. That's all we need for now. And then I got to get my hairdryer going. And the thing with the line and wash too is you do not have to be very precise. You can go outside of your lines. You can put more lines on later if you do go outside of your lines. You can be very wet in wet, very loose. It's a really nice style. I forgot to show you the book that inspired me originally. Let me grab it. It was given to me in 1986, so quite a long time ago. And it's one my dad gave me. Let's zoom out, because my dad lived in East Anglia. And Watercolours by John Tukey. And you can find YouTube videos by him. And this book really inspired me to do line and wash. I really loved his very, very loose, extremely loose watercolors, and he pulls it all together with those pen lines. Ones like this one. I found them very beautiful, very loose and inspiring. And his skies are mostly done on dry paper. We're just adding some water, which, by the way, is very difficult to do. Here he's got that kind of Naples yellow with the granulating ultramarine blue. And that's why I included the burnt umber this time, if you have one, because the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber really granulate beautiful. So does the ultramarine blue with the light red, or the English red or Venetian red. They're all the same. They're all pretty much this kind of terracotta brick color. So this was a very inspirational book for me, especially doing buildings, and just super, super loose. You remember when we did those loose little people? These are very loose little people, just blobs of paint. His windows are not particularly square or in line. everything is, you know, this goes outside the roof line. But when you take it as a whole, it has a lovely, lovely loose look to it. So anyway, so the next step, let's do all of the, if you make sure that your light sort of golden color is dry, we're going to do all of the blue areas with a nice small brush. You'll need like a number 1 or number 2 brush, or even a 0. And we're going to use that cerulean blue that you had, or you can use it a little bit more, and mix some cobalt in with it so that it's not quite so in your face summer blue. So it's toned down a little bit by the cobalt. Where am I? I'm using the wrong one. That's why I'm thinking, why isn't it toning down? It's because I'm not using the cobalt. There we go. Get a little bit of cobalt in there. So we want lovely, lovely bright blue for the window frames and the doors. And add a little bit of water. And we don't want it too watery because we've got very small spaces to add it. And we want to keep it under control. Moving everything. And you might notice I put a lot of the black windows in with my black pen first, because it kind of makes doing the window frames a little bit easier. So these window frames, I can just go like right over everything, over the black pen, and get those blue window frames in. And that's, I think there's a little bit of a frame above here. It's a funny shaped door, I think, to a storage room. And the door was actually white, but there was a blue frame around it. So just like that. And then we're going to leave the door white, and we'll put some shadow on that when all of this is dry. All the window frames are blue. So I've got my 0 brush here so that I can get in there with some nice thin lines. Quite a wide windowsill at the bottom, and then a sill across here too. And sometimes there's a little bit too much paint goes on, so I just suck a little bit up with my brush, just wipe my brush, suck a little bit up. Upstairs there's blue frames. The other thing I do is I put, although these gutters are going to be black, sometimes they shine in the sun and look in the sunlight a little bit blue. So I'm going to put on blue underneath, and I'll have Payne's grey over the top. And then when I lift a little bit of the Payne's grey, you're going to see that kind of a blue reflection in the sunlight rather than just bold paper. Keep going. Now, if you didn't black ink your windows to start with, don't worry. You can do them with paint, or you can go back and black ink them later, or do them with both. Whichever works for you. Now you can see why you don't want your paint too runny, because you want to have some control of it. That means not mixing quite as much water with your paint. The door was blue, and we will put a shadow on the door when the blue is dry. The place to be most careful is at the edge of the white, to make sure that you get a lovely straight edge. So that crisp white building shows up against the blue. I just put a little bit more pigment on there while it was wet. The sign is tricky. And again, I'm going to have even less water. I'm making a little bit more paint with less water so it doesn't run. And there was a blue painted border around the sign. I would have loved to have known sign painting techniques, that there was a class for sign painters. I didn't know about it, but I would have loved to have taken it to find out how they did the lettering and everything like they used to by hand back in the day. A friend of ours did the sign painting course and it fascinated me. Well, so much now is just done with stick-on stencils and that kind of thing. But back in the day you had people that came in with brushes and special brushes and paint, and they painted your signs. I'm just very carefully going around that signboard, and then I'm going to put the window frame in. I'm waiting to do the awning last. The awning was bleached in the sun, so I'm going to do that kind of bleach look to it when I put the paint on. That's why I'm waiting till last, getting all this in first. Again, down the side of the white building, that's where you want to be careful to get nice and straight. And if you make any errors with the window panes, you can come back with your black pen and fix those. Right, so the very last one I'm going to do is the awning. I'm going to switch to my number 2 brush, slightly bigger. And I'm going to put it on, I'm going to put the paint on full strength first. Maybe I added a little bit of water to it, so it flowed a little better. So once I've got that on full strength, I'm going to wash my brush and dry it. And then I'm going to lift a little bit off where it's sort of bleached in the sun. Not too much, you still want that blue look, but you want it not as intense as some of the blue in the shade and on the door. And of course the side is in shade, you don't do that part. And there, let's let that dry off. And if you look at my black and white picture, you can kind of see the lighter grey, how that was faded compared to some of the other blue areas. And on the modern house, everything is white on the modern house. All of those awnings and window frames, everything has been painted white. The door is back to natural wood. They have put a natural wood door in there. So. And no store there anymore, just a private house. So I'm going to get some cadmium red and a little brush, my little 0 brush again. And I don't want much water added to the cadmium red. I want it really nice and strong. Ooh. I'm going to bring my tray over, and I want my cadmium red strong, not too much water in it, because I'm just going to do 1 layer for the geraniums. If you prefer, you can always do a quinacridone rose for your geraniums if you prefer a pink geranium, one or the other, just so you've got a lovely, lovely, bright, warm flower in your picture. And again, these are very, very loose. We're not painting individual petals or anything like that. We are just popping in some geranium shapes. You can make a little bit more detail with your black pen if you want. Leave room for your leaves later. I'm just using the cadmium red. We're going to have quite a bit of green in the background, so they look lovely with the green. and pop those in. Now, also with my zero brush, or you might have one that's 000, I'm going to have to very, very carefully paint in the lettering for the stores. And I have to say, I drew about 6 of these, some for my grandchildren, no more than that actually. There were 2 ladies that joined my class late on Tuesday for the Wednesday class, and they didn't have the drawings, so I drew them for them. So 2 for my grandchildren, 2 for those ladies, 2 for the class, 6, and 1 more, 7. And I was getting a little bit slapdash by the time I got to the 6th and the 7th one with the wording. So I apologize for that. I wasn't as careful with the lettering. Oh, there we go. If nobody looks too close, they won't notice. And you need, if you find that a small brush is not working for you and it's too hard to get that in, wait till you're completely finished and find yourself a red pen and put them in with a red pen. That might be much easier for you. And it's not cheating, we're doing line and wash, we're using pen and watercolors. So, but because you're not going to be sure if your red pen is waterproof, it is something you should put in last if that's what you decide to do. Another little flower you can put in, and I think I invented this based on the photograph. I don't know if it was there, but I do know that I'd picked a lot of wildflowers out on our walk that morning. So I decided to put some dandelions in here. I'm sure we would have seen dandelions in this scrubby grass here. So I've got some Azo Yellow, some bright yellow, and I'm going to dot in here in this scrubby grass some dandelions. And if we put all those in first, then when we come along later with the green, we can just go around those bright colors, and hopefully they'll show up still. The plant pots and the roof are both going to be done in the Indian red, light red, not Indian red, sorry, Venetian red, English red, light red, any of those reds. I think there is an Indian red too that's very similar, which is a terracotta color, like a baked clay color. So it's perfect for the pots and for the clay tiles of the roof. So let's go back to the roof if you're nearly ready. I'll give you a minute. Also, you don't have to put all the lines of tiles on the roof if you don't want to, but doing pen and ink is the perfect time to sort of do that and have that texture of the roof tile, which is sort of slightly bowed from years of the very heavy tile resting on the probably oak beam rafters, kind of like pushes it down a little bit. So there is a kind of a dip to the roof tiles. We're also, you can do it just plain red roof, or you can add a little bit of ultramarine blue and red shadow to it. Now that's up to you. That's whether you feel you just want a lovely clean, you know, this one was pretty much a clean red roof, very little shadow. And this one was wet in wet, a little bit of ultramarine and red and the red as well. So that's up to you. I like putting shadow on things. I like working wet in wet. So I will be doing that, but you don't have to. You do what you feel comfortable doing. One reason I haven't used light red very much is it's quite opaque and granulating. And I don't always like that, but I've decided to give it a go. So this is my light red here, and you can see it's a lot thicker than some paints that I use. Beside it, I am going to put my burnt sienna, which you'll see is a bit more orangey, although they're both PR101 pigment. They're both a clay pigment, baked pigment, and the same pigment. So there's the two. This is burnt sienna. This is light red. And I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium red to my burnt sienna and see if I can get it close to the light red. I've got too much cadmium red now because cadmium red is a really strong color. Let's take it down a bit. So if you don't have light red, English red, Venetian red, you can try cadmium red and burnt sienna, or if you want your roof to be more orangey brown, use your burnt sienna. Now let's test those, see how they look. So this is the burnt sienna and cadmium red, and then next to it is the light red. So there's not a big difference, except the light red will granulate more and it's a little bit more opaque. So you can, if you don't have it, you can mix your cadmium red and your burnt sienna. When you really notice the difference is when you mix your ultramarine blue with your light red, and you get a granulation happening that's rather fun. So I'm going to add a little bit of light red to that ultramarine blue, not too much, and I'm going to make something that will granulate nicely and give it some shading to the tiles. So I'm going to use light red for my tiles. Just going to mix a little bit more and zoom in. There we go. Right, I'm going to use, I want to use a brush that covers enough roof quickly, but I've got a little bit of space to work in. So I'm going to try number 6 brush, as I have a smaller bit of paper, and I'm going to start with that light red on this side. I want to have it at a dilution that it's nice and strong, but I can see my lines through it. I want to be able to see my tile lines through it. So that would, if you can see the pen through it, but it's still a nice strong color, that is a good dilution. Because you're working on dry paper, you're going to have to be fairly quick to get your wash on before the paint dries. Otherwise you're going to have dry spots and wet spots, which will give you paint blooms. And I'm going to do the side of the roof. A little bit of cleanup along my tape. And see, it's already drying right here. So I have to never go back into that area where it's already drying. I have to be very careful that I get that on quickly before that dries, otherwise I'm going to get a bloom. And if I'm doing this wet in wet ultramarine blue color, I have to make sure that I'm doing that on wet paint, not down here where the paint's dry. I'm going to just have just a little bit of shadow going in the direction of the roof tile. I don't want too much, just a tiny bit. Too much is going to be overkill. And then just let it blend by itself. Don't put wet brush in and try and blend it with a wet brush. You'll get a great big water bloom, especially with this light red, because it is so opaque and granulating that you will get water blooms very easily. There is a little bit of light roof here that we'll come back and fill in with a little bit of sort of grey and beige when this is dry. I have gone over the edge here a little bit. I will have to clean that up a little bit when it's dry. And while I've got this colour on my brush, I'm going to do the terracotta pots down here. Probably should have changed to a smaller brush, but I'll just have to be very careful. I want some leaves hanging over the edge of the pot. I'm going to put some shadow on the pot later when this is dry. And I'm going to use my thirsty brush, clean, dried off brush, to just lift a little highlight on the sunny side, just a little bit. Not too much, because I'm going to put some shadow on the other side when that is dry. Now this, I think this red, or a sort of reddish roof, complements the blue beautifully, much more beautifully than the more sort of orangey brown of the burnt sienna. Although orange and blue are perfect complements, I just look at my original and it seemed, well, everything's a bit faded and washed out, but I think burnt sienna is just a little bit too washed out, and it makes a bit more of a statement with the redder brown. Now I have this blue and red mixed up. And grab my very small number 2 brush, and it's a nice shadow color, and I can do a little bit more. I added just a tiny bit more blue to it. I can do a little bit more shading on the wall. Because the wall was, I believe, flint, and that's quite a dark grey. Had quite a bit of texture in, so I'm going to just add a bit more shading to the wall. Not in any particular pattern, just kind of here and there to make the wall look a little bit darker. Now I also want to do a little bit more shading. I have that blue and red combo, which is actually separating on the tray. That's how they granulate out. They separate out. They're rather lovely. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt umber to that. You can add Payne's grey, you can add sepia, you can add anything to darken it up just a little bit more blue. Just want a sort of a grey, because I want to do a few things like the steps, have a little bit of shadow inside the door, and this is sort of a blue-grey colour. It's not like a dark black or anything going inside the door here. I'm going to water it down just a little bit and just put a little bit of extra shading on that step there. I'm just going to lift a little bit of that. It doesn't need to be quite as dark. Again, I'm going to water that down a little bit, and there's the curb here. It comes here and it goes down there, comes along here. Just adding a little bit of curb to the side of the sidewalk. If my ink pen hasn't really filled in the gap, oops, The roof here is quite shaded, and the gap beside the door. And there's also a shadow coming right over the door, a nice diagonal shadow. That's that same color. It's the ultramarine blue with the light red and a little bit of the brown added in, burnt umber. There's also a shadow on the side here. And I've watered this color down so it's not too dark because it's summer and the shadows are not really dark. But when you start putting shadows in, you start to get sunshine. You start to see that sunny look. Another place you can play around with is adding a few more to the road. So I like to sort of put my colour down a little bit of it and then take another brush, wet brush, and just sort of, you know, blend it in with a wet brush. So up against the edge of the road it's just a little bit darker, and on this side too. Blend it in a little bit. It was just a normal grey road. And we've got the lovely sort of warm raw sienna underneath to make it look warm and summery. Another thing you can do, if you want to, and I kind of like to do this, it gives a bit of texture. As long as all the paint's dry, I can put a paper towel on most of the rest of the painting, get some dark paint on my brush and do a little bit of tapping for like pebbly texture in the road, and tapping it hard on my finger. The paper towel's protecting the rest of the painting from that. It looks a bit harsh when you first do it, but it settles into your paint really quickly. And most of this is on masking tape, so it's not on the road. It'll settle into that little bit of wet paint and just give a little bit of interesting texture to the road. There's not very much road on there, it's just a tiny little bit. If you notice on the black and white picture, at the edge of the road here, probably a little bit of cement at the edge, it's much lighter, so I left that little light bit as it comes up to the sidewalk there. I'll get my little one I did. So we have quite a few places where we're going to put shadow. We're going to put shadow under this lip of the door here. We're going to put shadow where the window frame comes. We still have to do inside the windows. We're going to put shadow under this signboard here. I've done 2 layers of shadow. We're going to put shadow behind the plant pots. We're going to put shadow under the sign here. And we're going to put shadow under the roof. And again, I've done 2 layers. One for the roof overhanging and then one for the guttering overhanging. And then we've got a lot of things going on in the windows. If you notice in this window here, we've got the wall of the shop going back, and then we've got things in the window of the shop here, and then we've got places where it's shaded by the awning so you can't see what's in the shop. So this is kind of fun to make this area of the shop as if you can see things through the window. And same upstairs, this is very shaded by the awning here, and then there's some sort of unshaded parts of the window further down. So you can do some of that with black pen if you want, or you can do it all with black paint or Payne's grey paint. It's easier with paint, I have to say, because you can get this lovely look. So we've got a few places we're going to put shadow, and we're going to use that ultramarine blue and a little bit of red and a little bit of brown shadow. Now I just want to show you the Ultramarine Blue without any other colors in it. It's quite nice and bright. And of course, when you put it over another color, it gives a good shadow. But if you take the saturation down a little bit by mixing it with a little bit of red and a little bit of brown, you get that kind of muted gray, which is still largely ultramarine blue, but it's not quite so in your face overpowering blue, which will fight with the other blues in the picture. So go for a blue that's desaturated with some brown and some light red. And the lovely thing about the burnt umber and the ultramarine blue and the light red is they all granulate. So if you have the right amount of water with it, as these dry, they separate, and you can see the three different colors as these separate and they dry. You have to have the right amount of water with them, but I think it's rather a lovely effect. You can see it, sort of see it happening before your very eyes here as this starts to dry and crack, and then all the three colors come out. They're definitely separating on my palette. So I'm going to use, I don't want a brush that's too small, but I don't want one that's too massively big. I'm going to use my number 6 brush. I might switch to a smaller one for some of the smaller shadows. I'm just going to switch to the, where's my number 2. For the smaller shadows like this one here. So there's a shadow from this, the lip over this door here. I just want to put that in there. If it comes out too dark, you can just suck a little bit of that shadow up with your thirsty brush. Again, I'm going to use my smaller one because I want to put the shadow from this open window in. You can be very bold with your shadows. You don't need to wash them in or anything like that. They can be very strong. And we have this coming down, and we have shade under the windowsill, and we'll do inside the window in a moment when we've done these shadows. And I'm going by the black and white photo to see these shadows. Now I will switch to my 6 brush. I might need a little bit more paint. And I'm going to do the big shadow under the roof. So it's sort of, it doesn't come right to the edge of the house, sort of here, and you can go right, oh, sorry, you're not seeing me. Here we go. We're going to go right over the window because the window is in shade too. Now this shadow comes almost to the bottom of this window here. A little bit of shape, and it comes up here and it comes up and goes across here. And we're going to do another one over the top. Now don't stroke these shadows too much with your brush because you're going to lift other color off and you're going to get streaks. Try and get it on, that comes down a little bit, try and get it on in just sort of 1 or 2 brush strokes. And don't fuss with it too much. There's also shadow coming down from the awning here. Put that on. Oh, a shadow from the sign. You know, nice bold lines, no fussing with wet brushes or blending it in or anything, just nice bold shadow lines. There's quite a broad shadow under this sign here. Now we have no reference photo for shadows from the plant pot, so we're going to have to make it up. The shadow can come back from the pot and sort of go where the leaves go. And the minute you get all those lovely shadows in, you can see the sunlight when that happens, because you know the sunlight if you have shadows, maybe a little bit by this door. I'm going to pull back just one click. We'll do the dark guttering, the dark shadows, the dark windows last with our darkest color. We're going to do some of the greenery before we do that. I'm going to take a tiny bit of that grey. I'm just going to fill in that little bit of stonework here, which is very light on the photo. Just putting a little bit of light grey in there. See on the black and white photo, this area looks very, very light. Probably some sort of tile cement on there or something. I'm actually going to take a sort of a dry brush. I'm actually going to add a little bit of texture to that tile going down there, because it looks like it has a little bit of texture to it, and that will disguise some of my sloppy work too. There's always an out. There you go. Just old roof tile. And of course the guttering will be black. We'll come back to do a bit more shadow and the guttering, but we're going to work on all the greenery next before we do that. So when we do the greenery, I'm going to talk about it. What we want is to have a lovely bright green for the sort of hedgerows here, whatever this is, and on one side of the tree. And then we're going to make a darker green and work it wet in wet into that light green. Then I put a darker green layer on after that's dry. Now a light green is deceptively yellow. You will think it's too yellow until you get it on the paper with the other green, and then it will look green. So there's two ways to make this beautiful bright green. Well, there's 3, 4, 5 ways to make it actually, but I've said you can use Cobalt Blue and Azo Yellow, and that means mostly yellow and a tiny bit of blue. So let's grab a brush. Let's bring a tray over here. You can't see this. Okay, so I want mostly yellow, so quite a lot of yellow, nice bright yellow, and then a tiny bit of Cobalt Blue. Now you may think that this is still too yellow. It's not. This is quite green with that tiny bit of cobalt blue in it. Another absolutely gorgeous yellow, which I have fallen in love with, is Indian yellow. Oh my goodness, it's a gorgeous yellow. I can add a little bit of ultramarine to that. I can make another green that's slightly darker. A little bit more ultramarine. Now here's one that I learned about recently. Some ultramarine blue and some quinacridone gold. You may not have quinacridone gold, that's right, you don't have to make this green, but it is gorgeous. So that is ultramarine blue and quinacridone gold. Fabulous, and it's so transparent too. So there's 3 greens there, and one of them needs to be a very yellow green. So I'm even going to add a little bit more Azo Yellow to that green. Add a little bit more ultramarine blue to this one. If you want to get it really dark, you can add a little bit of burnt umber to it as well. I'm going to make one that's maybe a little bit darker. Ultramarine blue, a little bit of Azo Yellow. A bit more ultramarine blue, a bit more yellow. Not so much water, makes it darker. And then a little bit of burnt umber. And we've got it a little bit darker again. So I've got a range of yellows there. Greens rather, range of greens. I'm going to use start with my number 4 brush. And I'm zoom in again so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to start on the greenery over here first, and I want to use that very, very, very yellow green for this sort of hedge here. And I'm doing kind of like swirly brush strokes. It comes over the wall in places. You can make it come over the wall more with your pen when you're finished if you want to. And I'm going to switch to a slightly bigger brush, my number 6 brush. And I'm going to take some of that light green, that nice yellowy green, and I'm going to put it on one side of this tree. And already I'm losing a bit of the yellow in it. I had a little bit too much green, so I'm going to add a little bit more yellow to that. As soon as you put the other green on, it's going to darken up. And then I'm going to go in with the darker green. Remember, it's line and wash, so we're just kind of washing in color. And as we come down to this one, we're just going to touch the edge so that we get a gentle transition. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. Some medium and dark green, a slightly darker green, and we've got a much darker green. We've got some trees back here. And you'll see how the yellow just sort of disappears into the green and just has that kind of two-tone effect. If you feel this one's too dark, I might have done it a little dark. I'm going to take a little bit off, add a little bit of the yellow, lighten it up a little bit. But I want to contrast against the light edge of the shop. Now later, when that's dry, you can come in when it's dry and you can put a little bit more shadow in here. I mean, you can do it wet and wet, but you're going to lose a lot of it doing it wet and wet. So you do that when it's dry. If you're losing an edge here, just like pull a little bit back with the thirsty brush. And now we've got to do this, the scrubby grass down here. So that's a little bit more blue, a little bit more ultramarine blue with our green for that. And a small brush and flicking the brush upwards. And I get enough paint on my little tiny brush to make that grass around the edge of the sidewalk here and around your dandelions. And again, it's line and wash, so you can be fairly loose around those dandelions. Flick the brush upwards. And my granddaughter did a neat thing, which wasn't in the picture, but she came along and she put some little weeds here growing at the edge of the building, which is totally what happens, isn't it? Like at the edge of a building when there's not much attention paid to keeping everything clean. I kind of like that she did that. It was a nice little addition. I don't think anything about the photo showed that, but possibly over here. And this is really rough grass over there. So it's a nice little addition, I think. Now the geraniums, now they're often quite a strong green, so you want to have quite a bit of ultramarine blue or even sap green if you have some. But a bit of a stronger green for your geranium plants. And go carefully around those geraniums that you've got. Just make sure it's focused. Oh, it's having a little moment, isn't it? There we go, I think it's focused. Some leaves hanging over the side of these pots. And I'm going to take that slightly yellowy green, and I'm going to have some leaves that are coming up like this, one of those plants that has spiky leaves, just for a little bit of difference. Same over on this pot. I didn't put any spiky leaves on this pot. I thought that was overdoing a little bit. And then we also have a little bit of shrubbery just over the wall at the end of the house. So I'm going to start with the very yellowy green and just add a bit of darker green. There's not much there. I'll put the yellowy green on and add a little bit of darker green wet and wet. Have a little bit, maybe a little bit climbing up the wall. Kind of nice to have that lovely green and red now complement going on. Kind of really picks it up and puts that summery feel to it. And also, while I'm down by the plant pots, I'm just going to add a little bit of shadow to the back of the plant pots, just with the same sort of ultramarine blue and light red colour. Just there's a little bit of shadow on one side. You don't want too much. You don't need too much on a little line and wash painting. Just to make them look a little bit round. I'm just dotting a tiny bit of ultramarine blue on there. Just cool that terracotta colour down a little bit. So next, or the last thing actually, is the guttering and inside the windows. And there will be another shadow under the guttering, but I want to get all the guttering and the windows in first, and that can be the very last thing. So we can use all kinds of greys for that. If you just want to use Payne's grey because it's easy, that's a great choice. You can just grab some Payne's grey. And sometimes it's not always dark enough on its own. Sometimes I like to add a little bit of ultramarine blue to it and a little bit of burnt umber or sepia. It just kind of darkens it up, makes it a bit stronger. You can also use ultramarine blue and burnt umber. You can get almost as dark. That was just ultramarine blue and burnt umber. You can add a little bit of the light red to that if you want to keep all the colours that you have in the picture. Any of those are good. You just want less water, more pigment, and a tiny, tiny brush because we don't have much space to work in with the windows and so forth. I kind of like doing these little ones over here with pen, but if you didn't, then you're going to need a very tiny zero brush to get in there. I'm going to mix those two mixes together. I want to go inside this window here first and pop that very carefully in here. And what I like to do is put all of the colour in first and then lift, because that's easier for windows. And what I mean is I'm putting all that fairly undiluted colour in, and it's very thick. Now I'm going to wash my brush and dry it, and then I'm going to lift a little bit of pigment from the lower part of the window. If I look at this here, a little bit lighter grey in the lower half of the window. So just using a thirsty brush to lift that gently. I'm going in an upwards motion, and that's enough. That window is quite dark and you can't see much in it. So that's good. Now upstairs too, in the upstairs window, there's very little. You can see a little bit of the window frame and a little bit of the curtains up there. So it's nice to lift a little bit if you can. I've done a lot with the pen. I'm going to put the very dark grey in. Very carefully between the woodwork. And then I'm going to leave a little bit of the grey showing from the shadow. And again, I'm going to do a little bit of lifting, wash my brush, just lift a little bit. There's a little bit of sort of curtains showing. A little bit of lifting. Not too much. Now, where we can get creative is with the inside of the store, so that we sort of can see maybe merchandise in there, and this wall that comes in. So we don't want this wall white like it is now. What we want to do is use this color that we've got, put some water beside it here, and then pull a little bit of that color out. So you're not losing the dilution of all of your color. You're pulling a little bit out here to make a much lighter gray over to the side. And with that much lighter gray, you're going to do the inside wall of the shop here. So it's not so white. And if you feel it's a little bit too light, which I do at the moment, I'm going to come back with some of my darker gray, wet in wet, and I'm just going to add a little bit of the darker grey wet in wet to that light grey. Now, all along the bottom shelf of this store are things for sale. So I'm going to take that watered down grey, and I'm going to put that in first. And I've done some of the work with my pen as well. So my pen is showing some of the things in the window. There were little notes, I think, stuck to the glass. We're not going to get too persnickety about all of that stuff, but we can give a suggestion. Now I'm going to get into the dark grey, and I'm going to do the top that's shaded dark grey, and a little bit of this too, wet in wet. If you don't have a little tiny brush, do it with a pen when it's dry, or pencil crayon. There's nothing about this that says you have to be using paint all of the time. And this one. And I might want to lift a little bit from the center panes. And I might, when this is all dry, I might put just a little bit more shadow going across the whole thing. I just want to look at my original. It's nice that it's in black and white too, because it can give you a real sense of where you want your darks and your lights. So this actually, on this center part here, quite a bit of light showing. So I'm actually going to pull a little bit more light showing just here and pull it off with a thirsty brush. And looking at that again, just sort of here. And some little notes in the windows. Okay, and when that's dry, I'm just going to go across the whole thing with a little bit more shadow. Now that same color is going to be used for the guttering. And again, where the guttering is catching the sunlight a little bit, you can just wash that off with your thirsty brush here and here. You put the color on first and then wash it a little back with your thirsty brush. And of course you will see the blue underneath, which will be perfect. It won't be pure white. So I need a little bit more color mixed up here. I'm running out. I'm going to use I like the Ultramarine Blue and the Payne's Grey and the Burnt Umber. And not much water. Got my zero brush and carefully going to come along the guttering here. If you pull your brush, if you lay it down sort of on its side and pull, that is the best way to do it rather than trying to paint with the tip of the brush. That's a little bit harder. There's a bit of a gap between the roof and the guttering too, which is in shade. I'm even going to just not catch with my brush in some places to leave that kind of a little bit of a highlight. I'm going to take my thirsty brush. I'm just going to lift a little bit of colour. And of course, if you haven't got enough shadow where the door opens, you can add that dark there too. It's pretty dark and a little bit of shadow under the door. I also want I want a little bit more shadow along the curb here. There is a bit more, again, laying my brush on its side and pulling it along just to give a little bit more shadow there, a little bit more definition. You might want to put a little bit more on your wall. It depends. And I'm going to dry my guttering with my hairdryer so I can do that, the final shadow going in across. And I'm pretty sure that's everything. I double check and see if I've got everything in there. Let's just not blast you with the hair. Yeah, and get my number 8 brush and a little bit of that grey that I just made. This is nice and dry. And I'm going to put a darker shadow along under the guttering and a slightly darker one under the awning. And then we're pretty much done. If you feel that your trees have dried too light, you can always go back with a bit more dark green and put a bit more shade into them if you want to. Little sort of bubbly strokes. If you feel that way, or you can just do it with black pen if you want to. If you feel that your roof doesn't have enough lines, I've got a lot of pens of different sizes here. Let's see what I got. 0.1, that's quite thin. So I might want to, maybe my lines don't show up enough. Maybe the lines on the edge of the roof don't show up enough. And maybe I want to go in and emphasize those a little bit more. Anywhere that you feel you need a little bit more emphasis on something, you can put it in with your pen. And of course, if you're happy with it, sign it. And see what it's like with the tape taken off. Cleans it up a little bit. And there we go. We've got a few sizes of this one, including the giant one from, it says 1988. Look how faded that looks. So faded. I think that's probably mostly the paints, and maybe I wasn't using as much pigment back then, but big difference. I prefer the stronger ones. I hope you enjoyed doing that one. Next week, we're going to be doing a Scottish croft in the Highlands. So I'll see you next week. Bye for now.